I'm David Zaworski, and in this video, I would like to talk to you about the practice of daily examen. This is a prayer practice that's been around and an important part of many people's lives for a very long time. It is best as a daily practice. I will be the first to admit that I am not a very disciplined person about any formal daily practices, but I've found over the years that this is one that I return to for a season at a time. It's a lovely thing when feeling stressed or disconnected, or also in a time that's just abundant and good, and this is a way to more deeply savor that. So for whatever reason, maybe just curiosity, I'd invite you to give this a try. So I'm going to talk about the general outline and the elements of this practice, and then we'll take a little time to do a very quick dip into actually spending some time with these elements on our own. So, in general, this is described in 5 elements. The labels for them vary somewhat from one person to another talking about it, and sometimes the order is a little different, but the main 5 elements are gratitude and a review of your day, and sorrow and forgiveness and grace. The point of all of this practice is to notice divine presence in our lives each day and to develop our ability to do that noticing more and more with each day. It is, like any practice, one that can sometimes feel a little empty or tedious. Even the saints found this with their prayer practice from time to time. And the key is just keep doing it. Just keep doing it and expect that somehow grace is going to get through to you and come back into this time that you give to being with the divine presence. So I said 5 steps. I also want to bracket those 5 steps with a couple elements that I think just belong to pretty much any regular prayer practice. And so the first thing as you come into this time of prayer, is just to take a moment to take a few breaths and be aware of divine presence, however you understand that divine presence, whatever is the more that you feel yourself to be a part of and that is a part of you, that divine presence. Notice that. And I will also say that on those days when I'm a little slow and reluctant and having trouble getting into this, just taking those breaths and letting that presence come to me and be felt by me, that gets me a long ways toward being, okay, this is good. This is worth doing. And often I just find myself suddenly smiling, thinking about that. So just that moment of preparation, of readiness, maybe asking God in that moment for a better ability to see clearly, to be very honest with myself. So then the first step, gratitude. Yeah, whatever pops up to you from the day for which you're thankful, just notice it and give thanks. Put yourself in that attitude of thankfulness. And then the next step is reviewing your day. So this is the big one here of really running through in your mind's eye the whole of the last 24 hours. Thinking about everything that you did, said, thought, felt, all of that. Just kind of run the movie, but not as a passive observer. Run the movie, but notice as you do, what are the feelings that go with the different memories? Notice where things felt good, where they felt less than good. Notice any places perhaps that you really were aware of the divine in your day. Just review the day, let that pass before you in your mind's eye, and notice. As you do that, you're probably going to notice some places where there were opportunities to really be a witness, to act in a faithful way, to offer God's love. Opportunities, some of which you may have taken and you can celebrate, and those opportunities that you may have missed or turned away from. And that's the next step, is sorrow, those places where we realize we were not at our best in the day, perhaps just in unkind thoughts, perhaps in something hurtful we've done, perhaps in something we've left undone. Sorrow, that's a normal part of our human experience, and it's worth noticing, acknowledging. And when we do that, we can move to forgiveness, to recognize that the divine does forgive us, that we are completely accepted and loved. We can ask for that forgiveness, accept that forgiveness. Maybe we need to also forgive ourselves. And this is also a time to see if there's a calling arising for some kind of reconciliation with someone that you may have hurt or someone who may have hurt you. And finally, the last step is often labeled grace, asking for, receiving that wonderful grace of the divine. And I also think of it as the time for resolve and intention for the day ahead. So asking for God's grace for that day ahead, for noticing the divine, for seeing those opportunities and taking the opportunities to be our best faithful selves. And it may be that there's some specific intention that arises right here. And it's not mentioned usually as part of the examen, but I find it can be really helpful if there is some specific intention to write it down. Maybe write it down a few times and read it out loud to yourself, because that just sets it a little better in our minds. So grace to see the divine more clearly. So those are the 5 steps. And then at the end of any prayer time, just as at the beginning, I think of taking a moment to really come into and receive that we are in the presence of the divine. At the end, just take a little time to savor this time of prayer that you've had, to savor this time spent with the divine, this time of honest review, and let that settle in and be a blessing for the time and to carry into the day ahead. Okay, those are the steps. And now I'm going to invite you to move through these steps with me. And we'll do this in a very abbreviated way and kind of an arbitrary time frame, because obviously each of us would do these steps in our own length of time, and it would vary day to day. But I'm just going to step through and give a little bit of time for each step, just in silence, for you to dwell in that step and do a little bit of this work and experience it, at least a taste. And so we will move into that now. So let's just take 2 or 3 good deep breaths and remember that we are in divine presence. Now, gratitude, just whatever pops into your mind from the day, notice and be thankful. Now, that review of the day, running through the day, give us a couple minutes to make a good start on that. Notice everything about the day and how you felt, and maybe where you saw God's presence. Now, from that review of the day, were there places of sorrow, places that leave you feeling you were less than your best? Notice those. And bring those sorrows forward now to ask for, to accept, to trust in forgiveness. And this last formal step of grace, asking for the grace to more clearly see God in all that you do in the day ahead. And that's the daily examen. And again, let's take a few breaths and just savor what a blessing this is to spend some time in intention, bringing our day before the divine. So that's the introduction to the daily examen. I hope some of you may be interested and curious and want to try this out. If you do, remember that this is a prayer practice. So don't expect amazing things necessarily right off, but stick with it for a while. Give yourself a season. And I encourage you to try this out. If you want to know more about this and many other practices for growing in spirit and in discernment, I would highly recommend The Jesuit Guide to Almost Everything by Father James Martin. It's wonderfully written and one of the main sources I drew on for this presentation. So, thank you for spending this time with me. Blessings always.